I would say colonialism is a wonderful thing. It spread civilization to Africa. Before it, they had no written language, no wheel as we know it, no schools, no hospitals, not even normal clothing. Let's see about that, Mr. Smith.
Once upon a time, a long time ago, in a faraway land, there lived a great king. They say that he was probably the greatest king that ever lived throughout history. They say that for two reasons. One, because he was the richest king that ever lived. And two, because he used his wealth to help everyone he met. And his name was Mansa Musa. The most famous story about him was when he went to pilgrimage or Hajj to Mecca. It is said that he traveled with over 60,000 men from his kingdom in Mali all the way to the next continent, to Mecca, to perform Hajj. And on his path, he gave away gold bars to any poor person he stumbled upon. He also had his men build new homes and mosques for areas and people in need. It is also said that he helped boost the economies of countries he passed by, most famously Egypt. The economies improved because of the new marketplaces. When Mansa Musa was in Mecca, the merchants profited greatly. Musa's servants were elegantly dressed and were easily spotted in the marketplace. The merchants would charge up to 5 times the actual price and made a great profit from it. So much for ethics. I guess people were always greedy. Historians noted that his predecessor Abu Bakr II appointed him to take care of the kingdom while he set a 200-ship voyage headed west to discover new lands and never came back. So this debunks the idea that Africans reached America before Christopher Columbus. But on the other hand, 200 years later, when Christopher Columbus reached South America, he found different proofs that another civilization had reached the Americas way before he did. Historians agree that they were black Africans. Tiomoko Konati, head of the project tracking Abu Bakr II's journey, told BBC that Columbus himself said he found black traders already present in the Americas. Moreover, chemical analysis of the gold tips that Columbus found on spears in America show that the gold most probably came from West Africa. Some say that beyond Columbus, evidence of African contributions to American civilization includes importing of the art of pyramid building, political systems, and religious practices, as well as mathematics, writing, and a sophisticated calendar. Van Sertima cites the Aztec divinity Quetzalcoatl, who was sometimes represented in Mexico as a black man with a board, dressed in white, who arrived 6 cycles after the last man who came from the foreign lands. Others also say that the presence of stone heads with African features of the ancient Olmec civilization in South America prior to the Aztecs and Mayans is even more proof. With mounting evidence to suggest African presence in the Americas before Columbus, it may be fair to say that Africa's relationship with the Americas did not start with slavery, but with sailors, explorers, and kings. It pisses me off that we didn't learn about this in school. Mansa Musa is supposed to be the greatest and richest king in history, and I only heard about the guy a couple of years ago. I am also pissed that we didn't learn enough about Andalusia in Spain. The Arabic word for it is Al-Andalus. I remember that our textbook in high school had 1 page on the place and its history. That's all. It turns out that the majority of the Iberian Peninsula, which is now Spain and Portugal, was ruled by Arab African Muslims from North Africa, and the people residing in the peninsula were called Black Europeans. I had no idea. These people were a mixed race of Berbers and Arabs, leftovers from the Umayyad Khilafah, who eventually formed their own empire, and in the Middle Ages were the center of knowledge, culture, art, and trade in Europe. At its peak, Al-Andalus had a population between 700 to 800,000 Muslims, around 70,000 Jews, and a minority of Christians. Europeans named the Arabs and Jews of Al-Andalus Moors. It came from the Latin word Moris. The term was originally used to describe Berbers and other people from the ancient Roman province of Mauritania, in what is now North Africa. Over time, it was increasingly applied to Muslims and Jews living in Europe. 8 centuries of Arab-Muslim rule in Al-Andalus left a deep cultural impact on Spain, as well as Sicily, that was later occupied by the Moors. Much of the Arabic influence upon Spanish came through the various Arabized Romance dialects that were spoken in areas under Moorish rule, known today by scholars as Mozarabic. This resulted in Spanish often having both Arabic and Latin-derived words with the same meaning. I remember mentioning the love the Arabs have for poetry in a previous video. I guess this reiterates that. It is said that Abdurrahman III, who became the Emir of Cordoba or Qurtuba in 912, maintained peace in the Iberian Peninsula between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. He reigned up until 961, marked the zenith of Islamic civilization in Spain and the pinnacle of its golden age. By early 1492, the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, completed the Reconquista or the reconquest of Spain, defeating the last of the Muslim kingdoms, Granada. By the end of the century, the Inquisition, which had begun a century earlier, had coursed between 300 and 800,000 Muslims, and probably at least 70,000 Jews, to convert to Christianity. Spanish Catholics often suspected the Moriscos, or converses, of practicing Islam or Judaism in secret, and the Inquisition pursued and persecuted them. Some almost certainly sailed in Columbus's crew, carrying Islam in their hearts and minds to the New World in America. It is believed that the maps Columbus used in his journey were created by the Moors. Here comes a surprising thing to me. During the Spanish conquest of the Americas, Bernal Diaz del Castillo, the chronicler of Herman Cortez's conquest of Mesoamerica, admired the costumes of native women dancers by writing, very well dressed in their own way and seemed like Moorish women. The Spanish routinely used the word mezquita, Spanish for mosque, to refer to Native American religious sites. Traveling through Anahuac, today's Texas and Mexico, Cortez reported that he saw more than 400 mosques. Islam served as a kind of blueprint or algorithm for the Spanish in the New World. As they encountered people and things new to them, they turned to Islam to try to understand what they were seeing. Even the name California might have some Arabic lineage. The Spanish gave the name in 1535, taking it from the deeds of Espandian, 1510, a Romance novel popular with the conquistadors. The novel features a rich island, California, ruled by black Amazonians, and their queen, Calafia. The deeds of Esplandian had been published in Seville, a city that had for centuries been part of the Umayyad Khilafah. Caliph, Calafia, California. Personally, I think that it may be far-fetched, but who knows? Across the Western Hemisphere, whenever they arrived at new lands or encountered native peoples, Spanish conquistadors read the Requerimiento, a stylized legal pronouncement. In essence, it announced a new state of society, offering Native Americans the chance to convert to Christianity and submit to Spanish rule, or else bear responsibility for all the deaths and losses that would follow. A formal and public announcement of the intent to conquer, including an offer to the faithless of a chance to submit and become believers. Following centuries of war with the Muslims back in Europe, the Spanish had adopted this practice, Christianized it, called it the Requerimiento, and took it to America. Iberian Christians might have thought Islam wrong or even diabolical, but they also knew it well. If they thought it strange, it must be counted as a very familiar strange. 12 million indigenous people are believed to have died in what is today the conterminous United States between 1492 and 1900. Complete civilizations and cultures with their people were wiped out, so it is very difficult to know what exactly existed in the American continent and what was found, as history is always written by the victor. The writing of American history has also been dominated by Puritan institutions. It might no longer be quite true, as the historian and Southerner U.B. Phillips complained more than 100 years ago that Boston had written the history of the U.S. and largely written it wrong. But when it comes to the history of religion in America, the consequences of the domination of the leading Puritan institutions in Boston, Harvard University, and New Haven, Yale University, remain formidable. This Puritan effect on seeing and understanding religion in early America and the origins of the US brings real distortion, as though we were to turn the political history of the 20th century Europe over to the Trotskyites, a political ideology by Leon Trotsky that was mainly communist. You could look up the politics online if you want. Arabs and Muslims were part of Greater America from the start, including those parts of it that would become the United States. In 1527, Mustafa Zimuri, an Arab Muslim from the Moroccan coast, arrived in Florida as a slave on a disastrous Spanish expedition led by Panfilo de Narvaez. Against all odds, Zimuri survived and made a life for himself, traveling from the coasts of the Gulf of Mexico through what is now the southwestern US, as well as Mesoamerica. He struggled through servitude to native peoples before fashioning himself into a well-known and respected medicine man. In 1542, Cabeza de Vaca, one of the 4 survivors of the Narvaez expedition, published the first European book, later known as Adventures in the Unknown Interior of America, devoted to North America. De Vaca told of the disasters that befell the conquistadors and of the 8 years that the survivors spent wandering through North America and Mesoamerica. De Vaca even acknowledged that it was Zimuri who became the indispensable one. It was, wrote De Vaca, the Negro who talked to them all the time. The them were the Native Americans, and it was Zimuri's facility with native languages that kept the men alive, and even after a time, allowed them a kind of flourishing. It is believed that this language was Arabic. Between 1675 and 1700, the beginnings of a plantation society in the Chesapeake allowed local slave masters to bring more than 6,000 Africans to Virginia and Maryland. This boom in the trade propelled an important change in American life. In 1668, white servants in the Chesapeake had outnumbered black slaves by 5 to 1. By 1700, the ratio had been reversed. Over the first 4 decades of the 18th century, more Africans came to the Chesapeake. Between 1700 and 1710, growing planter wealth led to the importation of another 8,000 enslaved Africans. By the 1730s, an additional 2,000 slaves per year at least came to the Chesapeake. The American Chesapeake was transforming from a society with slaves — most societies in human history have had slaves — to a slave society, which is far more unusual. In a slave society, slavery is the foundation of economic life, and the master-slave relationship serves as the exemplary social relation, a model for all others. African slaves at that time were brought in from the Senegal, Gambia, Mali, and Guinea-Bissau. It is well known that much of their population consisted of Muslims. From all the African slave ships that arrived to America, it is believed that at least 20% of the slaves were Muslim. In 1758, Kunta Kinte, whose story was told in Alex Haley's book Roots, came from Gambia to the New World. Those of you who read the book know how, as a Muslim, how he struggled with his culture and faith, which were not accepted by his master. I remember when reading the book that he was forced to eat pork to save himself from starvation. It was noted that Kunta Kinte was from the Mandinka tribe and spoke the Mandinka language. I just found out recently that this language uses Arabic alphabets. Although Kunta's descendants were free at last in the end of the story, their history, culture, and religion were literally erased. Another less famous character was Omar bin Said. His autobiography was published in the US Library of Congress in 2017. He was an African Muslim man from Senegal who was enslaved and sold in Charleston, South Carolina. This well-educated slave, who later converted to Christianity, wrote his memoirs in Arabic, starting with a verse from the Quran, which explained that everything in this universe, including man, was owned by God alone. This was clearly a protest against slavery, In his memoir, he speaks about the events leading to his capture in Africa in 1807 and how he was shipped to America and sold. He was also Mandinka and died in 1864 in North Carolina. Based on his autobiography, West African as well as American history are being rewritten as we speak, as they unfold events that written history never brought up. I mentioned earlier that the Spaniards found many mosques and Muslims when they arrived to the Americas, and this may seem far-fetched to some of you, so here's some more evidence. A Muslim historian and geographer, Abdul Hassan Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Mas'udi, 1871 to 957, wrote in his book Muruj al-Dhahab wa Ma'adin al-Jawahir, The Meadows of Gold and Quarries of Jewels, that during the rule of the Muslim Caliph of Spain, Abdullah ibn Muhammad, 888 to 912, a Muslim navigator, Khashkhash ibn Sa'id ibn Aswad of Qurtuba, Spain, sailed from Dalba, Palos, in 889, crossed the Atlantic, reached an unknown territory, Ard Majhula, and returned with fabulous treasures. In al-Mas'ud's map of the world, there is a large area in the ocean of darkness and fog, the Atlantic Ocean, which he referred to as the unknown territory, the Americas. A Muslim historian, Abu Bakr ibn Umar al-Ghutiyya, narrated that during the reign of the Muslim Caliph of Spain, Hisham II, 976 to 1009, another Muslim navigator, Ibn Faruq of Ghurnata, sailed from Kadesh, February 999, to the Atlantic, landed in Gondo, Great Canary Islands, visiting King Guanariga, and continued westward, where he saw and named two islands, Caparia and Plutana. He arrived back in Spain in May 999. Columbus sailed from Palos, Dalba, Spain. He was bound for Gomera, Canary Islands. There he fell in love with Beatriz Bobadilla, daughter of the first Captain General of the island. The family name Bobadilla is derived from the Arabic Islamic name Abu Abdullah. Nevertheless, the Bobadilla clan was not easy to ignore. Another Bobadilla, Francisco, later as the royal commissioner, put Columbus in chains and transferred him from Santo Domingo back to Spain in November 1500. The Bobadilla family was related to the Abbasid dynasty in Seville, 1031 to 1091. On October 12, 1492, Columbus landed in a little island in the Bahamas that was called Guanahani by the natives, renamed San Salvador by Columbus. Guanahani is derived from Mandinka and modified Arabic words. Guana, Ikhwan, means brothers, and Hani is an Arabic name. Therefore, the original name of the island is Hani Brothers. Ferdinand Columbus, the son of Christopher, who wrote about the blacks seen by his father in Honduras, the people who live farther east of Point Canivas, as far as Cape Gracios a Dios, are almost black in color. At the same time, in this very same region, lived a tribe of Muslim natives known as Al-Mami. In Mandinka and Arabic languages, Al-Mami was the designation of Al-Imam, the person who leads in prayer, or in some cases, the chief of the community, or a member of the Imami Muslim community. A renowned American historian and linguist, Leo Weiner of Harvard University, in his book, Africa and the Discovery of America, 1920, wrote that Columbus was well aware of the Mandinka presence in the New World, and that the West African Muslims had spread throughout the Caribbean, Central, South, and North American territories, including Canada, where they were trading and intermarrying with the Iroquois and Algonquin Indians. When I look at history all around the world, I see a lot of blood, death, and destruction. I see wars and genocide, which have two sides to every single story. I see a second crusade that came to America and wiped out its original inhabitants. I see tyranny and colonialism at their worst. I always imagined what could have happened if the Mongols never attacked and destroyed the Abbasid Empire, and along with it, the Islamic Golden Age. And what would the natives in America be like today if not wiped out? And what would Africa be like if it wasn't invaded from left, right, and center? What would the Middle East be like if the Crusades never happened? And more and more. Being optimistic is who I am, and if I could take one good thing from all of this chaos, it's that we are all connected genetically. We are all related, from the Middle East to Asia to Africa and Europe, and all the way to the indigenous people of America. I guess we are all one big tribe after all. And I finally know why Arabs in America are always mistaken for Latin Americans. It's the Moors genes. In my next video, I'll be talking about Arab immigrants in the 1900s and Martin Luther King. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. Go ahead and click on that teeny weeny subscribe button. Go ahead, you can do it. And don't forget to like and share. And if you want to support the growth of this channel, click on my Patreon link in the description box. My son Aboud finally helped me set up my merch store. I'll be donating a portion of the money to charity. So if you're interested, the link is also available in the description box.